Could Nico Hulkenberg still be driving for Audi in 2030? I know it sounds a bit crazy, like a bit of a crazy question when you first think about it. By 2030, Nico would be in his early 40s, and obviously Formula 1 isn't a sport where drivers usually carry on forever. But honestly, I don't think we can completely rule it out. I'm not saying that because I know what's going on, I know what's going to happen with Nico's career. I don't. This is just my opinion based on what we know at the moment and how I see the situation, because I actually think Nico Hulkenberg could have quite an interesting few years ahead of him. So could he still be with Audi when they potentially fighting at the front? Let's talk about it. One of the things I find really interesting about Nico's career is how long he's managed to stay around Formula 1. He's been in and around the sport for years. He's driven for different teams. He's experienced good cars, not so good cars, and of course he spent some time away from having a full-time seat before making his comeback. And since he's come back, I just think something has changed. Maybe it's the experience, maybe it's the fact that he's more comfortable with himself as a driver now, or maybe it's simply that he still really enjoys doing this. Obviously I can't speak for Nico personally. I don't know exactly how long he wants to carry on, but from the outside he still seems to have the motivation, and I think that's really important. That's a really important part of this, because when you're talking about a driver potentially racing into his 40s, it's not just about age, it's about whether they're still quick, it's about whether they're still motivated, and it's about whether they actually still want to go through everything that comes with being a Formula 1 driver. The traveling, the training, the pressure, the media, the constant competition, all of it. And we've already that being older doesn't automatically mean you have to stop. Fernando Alonso is the obvious example. He's now 45 and he's still able to compete at the highest level. So when people say Nico will be too old by 2030, I don't agree with that. For me, the bigger question is, will Nico still be fast enough? If he is, then I don't see why age alone has to end the conversation. And that's where Audi becomes really interesting. Audi isn't treating Formula 1 like a short-term project. They've made it pretty clear that this is something they're looking at over the long term. They've got their own factory operation, they've got their own power unit project, and they talked openly about wanting to work their way towards the front of the grid. Audi has talked about wanting to be in a position to fight for world championship titles around 2030. Obviously that's an ambition, it's not a guarantee. Nobody knows exactly where Audi will be in 2030. Formula 1 can change incredibly quickly. Team can improve much faster than expected, or it can take much longer than expected to get everything working. So I don't want to sit here and say Audi will definitely be fighting for the championship in 2030. I can't know that, but the fact that they are talking about does make Nico's situation interesting, because if he stays at Audi, if he stays with Audi through the next few years, he could potentially be there for the whole journey. He could be there when things aren't going particularly well. He could be there while they're developing the car. He could be there while they're trying to figure out the power unit and get everything working together. And then if everything goes according to plan, he could potentially still be there when Audi starts fighting at the front. And I honestly quite like to see that, because Nico has spent a huge part of his career without having a car that could consistently fight for victories. And that's not me blaming him, and it's not me blaming the team he is driven for. That's just how Formula 1 works. You can be a very good driver and still most of your machinery that simply isn't capable of winning races. And I think one of the biggest unanswered questions in Hulkenberg's career is what could he have done if he genuinely had a competitive car for several seasons. Never really know, but perhaps he has still got a chance to find out. And that's why I find the Audi project so interesting for him. Imagine Audi gradually becoming a proper front-running team. Imagine the car suddenly good enough to fight for podiums and victories. And imagine Nico still there. That's when things could really interesting, because I genuinely think he could surprise people if he ever gets that kind of opportunity. Obviously there's another side to this. How long does Nico actually want to continue? That's something only he can answer. Formula 1 isn't easy. Even if you're still physically capable of doing it, there's a lot that comes with being a F1 driver. Eventually you have to decide whether you still want that life. I'm definitely not that Nico will stay until 2030. I'm not saying he'll race beyond 2030, and I'm not saying Audi has decided that he is going to be their driver for that long. I have no idea. I'm just saying that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him continue for several more years. If he is still enjoying himself, if he's still competitive, and if Audi still wants him, then why not? And there's another possibility that I think would be quite interesting. What if Nico eventually ends up somewhere else? Now I want to be really clear about this. I'm not saying that any particular driver is going to be replaced. I don't have that information. I'm simply talking about what potentially happens in the future. And personally, I could see the appeal of Nico returning to Aston Martin at some point if the opportunity ever became available. I think his experience could potentially be useful to a team with ambitions of competing at the front, but at the same time I could see him staying with Audi. I'd be happy with either. I'd love to see him remain with Audi and potentially be part of their rise. I'd also quite like to see him have another opportunity at Aston Martin if circumstances ever worked out. And obviously whenever driver market rumors come up, there are always going to be names being linked with different teams. Carlos Sainz is one of the drivers whose future has been discussed in connection with Audi at various points, but again I want to stress that I'm not presenting that as a confirmed move. It's just part of the speculation that surrounds the driver market. Things can change very quickly in Formula 1. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Sainz is replacing, because I simply don't know that. What I am interested in is the bigger picture. Where does Nico fit into all this, and how long can he realistically keep going? Because there's one other question I really want to talk about. Could Nico actually win a Formula 1 race? Now, I know that sounds ambitious, but I'm not predicting that's going to happen. But honestly, I wouldn't completely rule it out, and maybe I'm being a bit optimistic here. I don't know. I've just got a feeling that Nico's career could potentially come good quite late. He's already shown that he can produce very strong performances when the opportunity is there, and finally getting that first podium in 2025 was a massive moment. After waiting so long for a podium, it showed just how much the right circumstances can change things for a driver. Imagine he eventually gets an Audi that is genuinely capable of winning races. Suddenly we're not talking about whether Nico can drag a midfield car into a good result. We're talking about whether he can fight at the front, and if he gets the opportunity, I wouldn't want to completely rule him out. Winning Formula 1 races takes a lot. The car has to be quick, the strategy has to work, the reliability has to be there, the driver has to perform, and sometimes you need a bit of luck as well. I'm not saying Nico is definitely going to win the Grand Prix. I'm saying that if he gets the right car, it's possible. And if he did it late in his career, that would be some story. And actually, this is a good point for me to talk about something a little more personal. Things haven't always been easy for me outside YouTube. I'm currently struggling with my disability benefits, and it's been difficult to deal with. But honestly, making these videos give me something that I really enjoy doing. I love Formula 1, I love talking about it, and I really enjoy being able to sit down and make these videos for you guys. It gives me something to focus on, and I'm genuinely grateful that people who watch them. I'll be honest though, sometimes I wonder why the channel hasn't grown as much as some other Formula 1 channels out there have. I don't really understand it. You see other channels taking off, getting loads of views and subscribers, and sometimes you can't help but wonder what you're doing differently. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's something I could improve. Honestly, I don't know. But I'm still here. I'm still making videos, and I'm still trying to improve. And I'm still trying to improve the content and hopefully grow the channel. And I want to make something very clear. I'm not saying this because I expect anyone to feel sorry for me. And I'm not saying that anyone owes me anything. I'm just being honest about where things are at with me. If the channel grows, that would be fantastic, and it could potentially give me more opportunities to earn some additional income towards things that aren't currently covered by my benefits. But regardless of how quickly the channel grows, I'm grateful for the support I already have. Every view matters to me, every like matters, every comment matters, every subscriber matters. And if you've been watching my videos for a long time, thank you. And if you've just found the channel, thank you as well. I genuinely appreciate it. I'm going to keep making these videos because I love Formula 1, and hopefully we'll keep building this little community together. Anyway, enough about me. let's get back to Nico, because when I look at the situation, I think there are some really interesting possibilities. Could he still be at Audi in 2030? I think it's possible. Could he go beyond 2030? Again, I wouldn't completely rule it out, but there are obviously a few things that would have to happen. He needs to remain competitive, he needs to remain motivated, and perhaps most importantly, the team would need to want him. If all of those things happen, then I don't see why we should say that he has to stop because he's reached a certain age. Ultimately, Formula 1 is about performance. If you're still fast enough, if you're still enjoying it, and if a team still believes you're the right person for the job, then that's all that matters. And that's what I think the next few years could be, and that's why I think the next few years could be really interesting for Hulkenberg. So much of his career, it felt like he was waiting for the opportunity that never quite came, but now he's finally part of a factory project. He's already experienced that first podium, and potentially he has the chance to be involved in Audi's long-term development. So maybe, just maybe, the latter part of Nico Hulkenberg's Formula 1 career could end up being the most interesting part of it. Imagine Audi becoming a championship contender. Imagine Nico still being there, him finally getting a car that gives him a realistic chance of fighting for wins. I love to see that. What do you guys think? Do you think Nico Hulkenberg could still be racing in Formula 1 in 2030? Would you like to see him stay at Audi for the long term, or would you rather him take another challenge if the opportunity came along? And most importantly, do you think Nico Hulkenberg still has a Formula 1 race win in him? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you want to support the channel beyond subscribing, you can scan the QR code on screen or check the links in the video description. Everything is appreciated, but nothing is expected. And genuinely thank you to everyone who has supported me so far. I really do appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you for another video.